Hello, cuties. How are you today? You're welcome back to our online class, and our subject for today is science. I hope you've been keeping safe. I hope you've been washing your hands regularly. Now, our topic for today is float or sink. That is, we want to learn about floating and sinking objects. Have you ever wondered why some object floats or sink? Now, how do you know whether something will sink or float? Let's try to make a prediction of this object displayed on the slide. When you put a watermelon inside the water, does it float or sink? Or when you put a stone inside the water, what happens to such objects? Does that mean it floats or sink? So also when you put a plastic cup inside the water, does that mean it floats or sink? So I want us to make a prediction of this object, either it floats or sink. Now, what causes something to float or sink? What causes an object to float or sink? Well, it's all about what we call density. What do we mean by density? Density simply means how tightly or loosely packed an object is. Density means how tightly or loosely packed an object is. Remember when we did the three states of matter, we said in solid, molecules are tightly packed, and in liquid, molecules are loosely packed. So what do we mean by floating? Floating is when an object is on the water. When an object is on the water, we simply mean such object is what? Floating. Let's look at the examples. I have a bottle cover, a plastic duck, a leaf, and also a cork. When all these objects are put inside the water, it floats. Why? The reason is the objects are very what? Light. Now, objects that are lighter floats in the water. It doesn't go down the water. Object like a foam ball floats in the water because the molecules are loosely packed. Now let's go to sinking objects. Sinking is when the whole object is below the water. That is, when these objects are put inside the water, it does what? Sink. It does what? Sink. You can get a bowl of water and put some of these objects inside it and see, maybe it floats or sink. Objects that are heavier sinks in the water. Objects that are heavier sinks in the water. Another thing I want us to note is the material we use to make an object is very important. The material we use to make objects is very important. It determines whether an object will float or sink. Remember I said objects that are light or objects that are loosely packed floats in the water. That is what makes an object to float. Another challenge is, does the weight of the object make it float or sink? Of course, yes. Remember when you hold a stone, how do you feel? Is it heavy or light? Of course, when you carry a big stone, the weight of that stone is heavy. And when such object is put inside the water, it does what? Sink. So the weight of the object determines whether an object will float or sink. So also the properties of material determines whether it floats or sink. Now, apart from material, some objects that do not float when they are in one shape might float when they are in another shape. Objects that do not float in one shape might float when they are in another shape. Now, part of the reason a ship floats is due to the shape. The shape of that particular ship helps it to float. But when the ship is about to sink, it simply means the load on the ship is too much and it helps it to do what? Sink inside the water. So, the weight of the object makes it sink. But when an object is light, it floats inside the water. So, in conclusion, things can float or sink not only by the weight but also the material and the shape of the object determines whether it floats or sink. Going back to our slide, I want us to get some of these objects displayed on the slide. So you practice it to get a bowl of water. You can get 2 bowls of water. Get the one that is for sinking and the one that is for floating. So you put this object for floating inside the water to see maybe it floats. So also you can get for sinking objects. Put it inside the water and see maybe it sinks or floats. I love you all. I hope you enjoyed the class. See you and remember to keep safe. Thank you for listening. Goodbye. Ayé mi ò kí ní yóò máa save o sister.